Mike, I have a genuine question that I've been wanting to ask someone for a while. Is seltzer water real water? Because I can drink a lot of seltzer water and I don't feel hydrated. And they say that there's nothing else in there, but I know that there is, or there's something missing. It's different than normal water, and I want to know why. And I'm wondering if you have some scientific explanation or something.
Uh, Good question. Um, I think I agree that I usually don't feel very hydrated when I drink a lot of seltzer water. I don't know if that's psychological or not. Um,
Start paying attention to it. It's not real water. It's something else, and I don't know what it is.
well, I the scientific explanation sort of kind of is that it should just be water with CO2 dissolved in it. I think it becomes carbonic acid, but I could be wrong. But you can make it by just pressurizing water with a whole bunch of CO2. That's how the soda stream type
I do
things
that.
work.
I have a soda stream,
Oh,
and I do
okay.
that
Yeah.
sometimes. But as soon as you add bubbles, it's not. It doesn't work the same anymore.
Well, let me ask you this. So I don't have a soda stream. I'm just this horrifyingly wasteful millennial who buys aluminum
That's
cans.
that's what I normally do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm both.
Well, if you let it sit, you would think that okay, all the CO2 goes away and you're left with just water, but it tastes gross. It's not like normal water.
Yeah.
So there's something there, right? Is that the same with the soda stream water?
Yeah, I think so. I'll have to do an experiment, but I'm pretty sure that yeah, it becomes gross if you. So the bubbles, when they're no longer bubbles, they taste bad,
Yeah.
and something happens. But anyway, I just wondered if you had a.
It certainly does not seem hydrating, but it also could just be that you don't drink as much. You drink a single 12-ounce can and think that, you've just had a lot of water, but it's really not that much.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, look into it for me.
It's suspicious one way or another.
So, how was your week?
Yeah,
Did you drink any seltzer water?
I did. We we made or Sam placed a like delivery order with the grocery store because she wanted them to bring us mulch. We don't have a car, it's just bikes 100% of the time, so we do groceries on bikes and stuff, but it's almost like you're about to set off on uh like a journey to space where you have to really carefully weigh everything and figure out how much space you have and pack everything just perfectly, because if you have too much stuff you'll die on the bike. So we usually can't afford the weight of large heavy things like seltzer water, but my wife made a delivery order and she wanted them to bring us mulch. And so we were both like, oh my God, if they're gonna do a delivery, just order 1,000 pounds of seltzer because that's the one thing that we want, but we never can get because it's too heavy. So we did. And then once the shopper person was on her way, she's like, oh, by the way, they didn't have any mulch. So we didn't even get the thing that we ordered. But we did get this massive delivery of seltzer water. So now we're working through that.
I've also ordered massive amounts of seltzer water because sometimes you get them on BOGO, and then you just
Oh, God, I've never got it on BOGO. That sounds
when
amazing.
when they're on BOGO, I just load up on them.
Yeah. Well, you have a soda stream though. Why don't you just do that?
It's a good question because when I when I go through the whole tank, then I have to take it to the store and fill it back up, and I procrastinate on that
Right.
and never
So
do it. So
laziness is
I
the
use the
answer.
Soda Stream for yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
let's
what I
move
thought the
past the
answer
seltzer
was gonna
water.
be. Right.
Yeah,
No, my week was good. I Some of the big news is that I purchased a yo-yo.
a yo-yo.
Yeah. Well, so I'm working a lot on my personal project, the main quest, right? So that's every morning. And then I'm doing my job. And then most of the time, my hobbies include playing video games at the same computer that I've been working at for 10 hours. And I started to think, man, I really want to just do some other stuff. I feel like everything I do literally everything, just about, is me at a computer. So I want physical stuff. And I bought a yo-yo and I started playing with that. And I don't think I ever had one, but I had a friend who was, well, Brad, if you remember, who was amazing at yo-yos. He like placed highly in the state championships or something.
Yes, of
But I
course I
remember,
remember that.
yeah, okay. So I remember him teaching me some stuff, and I don't know. I just saw it on Amazon. Was like, cool. I'm gonna do that, and it's great. It's so nice. I've been yo-yoing all day. I keep
Have you
whacking my
learned
fingers though.
tricks and stuff?
I mean, I can do the bind pretty consistently. For anyone who isn't familiar with yo-yoing, which is hopefully everyone, most of the kind of fancier yo-yos, they're what's called unresponsive yo-yos, where you send it down and it's on a bearing, and you can't make it come back by bouncing it or anything. It just sits there, it sleeps until it's done. So you have to kind of twirl it around the string and do this little fancy move to where the string kind of binds up and then it rolls back up. So that's the first trick you have to learn for an unresponsive yo-yo, is how to get it to come back, because it's a little bit of a fancy thing. So spent yesterday trying to figure that out, and then today trying to learn to do a couple little things before I bind it and come back. It's it's really fun to be doing something that I'm just awful at and don't know anything about, because it's completely free of any kind of internal pressure or anything. It's just this pure amusement. I have no plans for anything. I just want to do it because it's fun. And it's
Right.
actually this really big almost relief of everything else that I've been doing, which is my job where I have to be very productive, my personal project stuff that I have to feel very productive and focused for. And then even, I play StarCraft most of the time as my, downtime. Maybe other games too, but a lot of StarCraft. And even that's a super try hard game that I've been playing for years, and I'm trying to maintain my status as one of the top players. So just playing with a yo-yo is really fun.
Well, okay, I'll just grab it real quick. I've been going through this book on show card writing. It looks like this.
Show card
Not a
writing?
Yeah, it's like a lost art in the 1920s and earlier. It's like, beautiful fonts that are written with
Oh,
uh, brushes and dip pens, and it's just super cool fonts and
for a
like
flyer
design.
for a play or something like that? Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
like invitations that they used to do back in
Oh,
the day. I'm trying to find an example. Not that. Yeah, see, look, this
oh
kind of
wow.
thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's all hand done.
yeah, it's like handwritten with
Yeah.
a brush or a dip pen or something. It's super cool. But I just wanted to. I know nothing about fonts, and I've never known anything about fonts. I could not identify the different types at all. But I've always wanted to be able to just, I don't know, just write in some cooler looking fonts than my chicken scratch handwriting.
Is it
So
called a
I
font
got
when
this
you
book.
write it? Is that can you
I
handwrite in a certain font?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I don't
That was a
know.
question.
I
See, I know nothing about fonts or anything about this, but I've just wanted to start getting into it. So I got this book, and it has tons of examples. I just got it like a week ago. It's got tons of examples, but it doesn't really have any instruction. And at first I was getting kind of frustrated. I'm looking for the how to, like, where do I start? How do I do this?
yeah.
And there's just not really anything in it. So I just start copying stuff and messing around with it. And it was like the yo-yo. I'm just having fun with it. And then I start, and I can do like these two different alphabets, and I know that I'm not doing it correctly, and I'm just using like a pencil or a crappy pen, and you're supposed to be doing it with a brush and a dip pen and
Yeah.
and the inks and stuff. But I'm learning a little bit about the fonts and having fun with them and kind of messing around with them. And now every time I write on the whiteboard, it's like in these two fonts, and in my sketchbook and in my little journal thing, everything has these cool titles now. I mean, it's I wouldn't show anybody it, but
Oh,
it's
that's cool
fun.
though.
Like it's really fun, and I have no idea how to do it correctly, but I'm just really enjoying it, and I it's been a long time since I've felt that type of just experimenting and having fun and enjoyment of something new
Yeah.
without worrying about whether I'm doing it right or wrong or whatever. And it's starting to kind of bleed into other areas. That feeling of just, oh, I'll just figure it out myself, you know. Not that I think that's the best course of action for everything, but there's definitely a, I don't know, a part of that that I want to hold on to, I guess. So I want to yo-yo with other things.
Response. Well, what's really funny is that I had the exact same thinking. Is I got the yo-yo, and I'm, there's this tiny little Google translated instruction thing of how to put the new bearing in and tie the string and everything. So I'm like, okay, I got enough to where it works. But then I
Mm-hmm.
start getting on YouTube of, okay, how do I do the bind? I knew enough to know that I needed to be able to do that. And I start looking up basic tricks. But after a few minutes, I start thinking, no, I don't really want to do
Right.
that. So I just started playing with it, and I kept had a little bit of that feeling of, oh, let's go look this up. What's the right way? What's the right way? But then I'm thinking, what does right way even mean? I have
Right.
no plans here. I just want to play and discover stuff. And by making that little bit of a limitation of, okay, I really don't want to look stuff up,
Mm-hmm.
you start to think about it a lot differently of, yeah, just start to try to notice stuff of, okay, sometimes when I throw the yo-yo it vibrates a lot, so how do I, what do I need to do to keep it from vibrating? And then, okay, sometimes if the yo-yo is off axis, can I move it to where it goes back on axis? So you start to play with it by kind of putting a fingernail against it and noticing that it's obviously a gyro. So if you push the top of the yo-yo, it doesn't lean over like you would expect for a normal object because it's a gyroscope. So you push the top, and then it causes the front to deviate this way. And so you learn the little spots to touch it to make it move around differently. With the little bind, you start to notice that it's easier to bind if I throw the yo-yo up higher, but then also it can catch the string earlier. And so it's a little bit harder to do it down low, but then it winds up better. Just a bunch of
Right. All
stuff,
things that, yeah.
yeah, that I wouldn't be thinking and trying and just playing around with if I was just looking for, okay, here's what you do. Okay, let me follow the instructions of this person. It's really fun.
So in the book, he's got this example of this one font that I think is really cool, and it looked really easy. That's why I kind of gravitated towards it. But he's using it as an example, and so he writes the sentence with that font. So I'm like, awesome, that's a really cool looking font. Let me find the alphabet that he wrote out somewhere in the book. Well, he doesn't have it written out in the book. He just has that one sample sentence. So
Huh.
there's letters that are missing, you know. So I tried to do the alphabet and I'm missing maybe 5 letters. One of them is like an N or something.
Hmm.
And I'm getting really frustrated because I want to know how to draw an N in this font. I know it's such a stupid thing, but I I'm getting upset. I'm like, where is this N? How do you do the N in this font? I'm like, screw it. I have to make it up. And so I end up filling in the rest of the alphabet, and I don't know, it kind of forced me to just
Yeah.
be free and like rely on myself to just kind of have fun with it, and that there really is no exact right way to do it.
Yeah, it's just
Um,
something that someone else made up at some point. Why don't why
yeah,
don't you make it up?
I don't really want this happy experimental phase to end. So I want to try to protect it, but also keep learning,
Yeah, but
you know.
I feel like if you start thinking about it too much, then it goes bad.
Mm-hmm.
You when you're just playing and trying something and there's just no pressure, and so you aren't judging yourself and feeling intense or angry or frustrated, you're just kind of having fun. It's a very pure state of mind. But as soon as you start thinking, oh, I gotta think this way, I gotta think this way for other
Right.
stuff, I gotta be in this good state of mind, then suddenly you're thinking about yourself. You're not just doing the thing.
Yeah, and right now, for both of us, you're a person that can't yo-yo that just bought a yo-yo, and
Yeah.
I'm a person that knows nothing about fonts or show card writing or anything, but I just bought a book on it and I'm messing around with it. So we're both right now people that cannot do these things.
Yeah.
But in, a year from now, we might stupidly start considering ourselves people that know how to do these things. And then there's
Right.
this added pressure and stupidness that plays into it. So I want to avoid that, or just kind of watch to see when that comes in and
Yeah.
if I can fend it off or if it's just
I
inevitable.
feel like it's already knocking,
Yeah.
It's funny. Mental states are so difficult. It's very similar, I think, to when you meditate and you start at first you just have a hard time. You can't get your mind to sit on one thing. And then you get it a little bit, and it's like this pendulum that immediately bounces back of you start to get it and then you start to think, I think I'm starting to get it. I'm getting good at this.
Right.
And then you're not focusing on your breath anymore, focusing on whatever it was. Now you're thinking about how you're good at this now. That really pure, beautiful state of mind where you're just fully involved in what you're doing and enjoying it and discovering, and it's hard to hang on to that.
Do you see yourself um, feeling that way when you're, say, working on your programming stuff? Or, where does that show up, or does it? Or does it not?
You mean the good mind state or the bad one where you
Yeah,
start
yeah,
to
like
analyze?
that very playful mind state. How do you conjure that or
Yeah.
protect it? In other things, like if you're creating this app and you've been programming for a very long time. When do you feel that playfulness,
Um
or where does it show up?
it it definitely does show up. I think it shows up when when I find something new that's kind of interesting to me, some new technique or an idea, just something that feels a little bit novel can be really fun, where I just get excited about learning how to do it, especially when I find some new thing. uh I don't want to talk about this because it's too boring to explain, but a week or two ago I was talking about how I was trying to get this server and client synchronization going, using this very new and kind of almost theoretical technique of conflict-free replicated data types. Anyway, it's the kind of thing that it's, again, it doesn't matter. It's too boring. But it was the kind of thing where it feels very theoretical and a little bit out there, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it. But then I'm starting to put it together and it's starting to actually work, and I can test it out and it works and it's cool. And that just gets very exciting, where it feels like I made something and it's working, and it all the other stuff tends to fall away, where I'm not really analyzing and thinking about the future or anything. And my mind is just so happy to be playing with something and seeing it do what I wanted it to do. Like that state, that feels the most like the I just bought a yo-yo state of it's just fun. There's something fun about it and exciting. I mean, does that happen to you
Yeah.
or
So how do I explain? Okay, so I'm trying to, either last week or the week before, you told me that if I don't finish this painting, if it's 7 months out and I still haven't finished this painting and I haven't done anything else, like I've totally failed the whole project, because the point of it is to do this painting and also have a bunch of other stuff going and
yeah, you're building a
keep things
universe,
moving.
not a painting.
Exactly. And I had zeroed in so much on the painting, I had kind of began to neglect the rest of the everything. So since you said that, I've stayed focused on the painting, but also tried to step away and start thinking about the bigger picture, and also dedicate some time to that. And it's been amazing, actually. I think that was exactly what I needed to do. And okay, so what I'm trying to do is not a traditional way of how illustrators work. Um, and it's not something that a lot of people do. Like creating this, you keep calling it a universe, but I think that makes it sound too epic. All I'm trying to do
What
is
is it
create.
then?
It's like,
I mean, I'm not saying you're writing the next Lord of the Rings or anything, but
yeah, you know, Tales from the Loop, Simon Stallenhag.
it sounds.
Uh,
Remind me, because it sounds extremely familiar.
he's an illustrator artist that he's put out a couple different books.
With
Tales from the Loop is one of them.
like the broken
Um,
down robots and the.
yes,
Okay,
yeah, and all
yes.
the. Okay, that's
Describe
kind
it,
of,
because nobody else is gonna know what that is.
some people will know what that is, but he's an artist that has kind of created these little worlds, and they all seem very related. But he's put them into books, So he's got a couple different books in there. I don't even know what to call them. I think you would call them a graphic novel.
Maybe
Uh,
it feels a
but
little different
they're
than
like
most
picture,
graphic novels.
yeah, because they're not like comics. It's an art book with a story, right? And he has a couple different books, and I think not in terms of content or subject matter, but in terms of format. I think that's kind of what I want to end up uh, doing, where you kind of create this little world and then you make a bunch of art sort of exploring this world. And it's, he has these books, so it's very narrative driven. There's a
Mhm.
beginning and an end, but they're all kind of related and they all sort of take place in the same Simon Stallenhag world. And that's kind of what I want to do. So, I've been kicking around some like story ideas, and it's really just to generate imagery, right?
Yeah.
So you come up with a very loose story, and then you can thumbnail out, however many drawings you want that kind of fit into that story, and then you can turn those into whatever you want. And so for this painting that I'm working on, I had this rough idea of a story. I just pick a snapshot of it, and then now I'm doing a painting of it. And the painting, theoretically stands on its own. But if I did another painting, it might be also related to that story. And I can build this whole little art universe. But I don't know. It would make a lot more sense if I could just finish everything and point to it. But does that start to make a little bit of
It
sense? Or
does. I Yeah, it does. It is like a graphic novel. What you're describing is there
yeah.
is.
Although
It's
at the
more.
moment I'm not. Yeah, at the moment I'm not trying to create a graphic novel. I'm trying to create the world in which eventually I maybe could create a graphic novel or storybook or whatever you would call that.
So when we did that little challenge and you were doing fiction writing,
Yeah.
you had some
Yes.
plans. That wasn't just for fun and amusement.
Well, it is for fun and amusement, but
Well,
but
yeah,
yeah,
but
actually, the painting I'm working on right now is from one of those 2-minute sessions that I did during that challenge.
that's cool.
So when I was looking for something to paint, I just pulled that up and I looked through my 30 something ideas that I wrote in the 2 minutes, and I grabbed one and then just kind of expanded on that, and then now it's the painting I'm working on. And I forget why I started talking about this in the first place. I think it was because I wanted to
No,
talk about the.
the
Go ahead.
question originally that you asked me and then I threw back to you was, are you able to get into that fun mindset of just playing and discovering and just enjoying yourself?
Yeah. So I feel like art and me have been in this frustrated relationship for the last few years, and it's all starting to kind of unravel and get so much less frustrating and so much more exciting and just fun again.
Yeah.
Uh, because of this, because of the art is now coupled with these stories. And I've never written before. I don't know anything about fonts, and I don't know anything about writing. But because I'm now coupling this thing that I've learned a lot about, art, with this other thing that I know nothing about, writing, they've started to kind of intertwine and become just this really fun, exciting thing. And so as I'm trying to come up with ideas on, building the art universe, world, whatever, I've started to think, well, who should I look to for inspiration or for education, or just, who do I go to for answers when I run into stuff? And it's not really writers. I mean, it definitely is in some aspects, but I'm not trying to write a book right now. I'm not trying to write a novel or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, a lot of what writers talk about is actually writing a novel and all of that. So there's a lot that relates, but not everything. I've found that it's or currently what I'm relating to the most is filmmakers. Like Guillermo del Toro and M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
That guy. And David Lynch and the Duffer Brothers, and just all these different filmmakers, because they kind of have to construct this world and this whole make-believe thing and put it all together. And so I've just been consuming a lot of documentaries on how films are made, and I signed up. Actually, that was one thing I wanted to tell you about. I signed up for, I think it's called masterclass.com or something like that. This is not an ad, but I signed up for it.
I wish it was an ad, but it's not.
Yeah, we don't get paid for that.
Yeah.
The Duffer Brothers just released this course on there, and when I say course, all that shit we talked about, how courses suck.
Right.
This is actually, I am absolutely loving it, and it's not really a course. It's more like a series of videos, or just like a documentary on their writing process. And oh god, I love it. I'm only like 4 or 5 episodes in, but it's just perfectly lined up with what I'm trying to do and what I want to do. I'm also watching this other course from David Lynch, which is also amazing.
David Lynch.
And so I've just been
made a course, like you're.
Yeah, like yes. And it's so weird because he's clearly not a teacher or a professor, but he's just sitting there talking about how he writes stuff. Okay, so this is what's so cool about it. And I've only watched 2 courses, and I've only watched a couple episodes from each one. But normally, okay, say they did this for a college or something, like an online school, and you signed up for it. It would be very much like a college course. And you would watch it, and it would feel like you're in a class. And all the things we talked about, what we don't like about courses, would be there. Like the very rigid structure, everything's about a test and grades and whatever, and it's just all that stuff. But this is like, normally for someone like David Lynch, if he was doing a documentary for the general public, they would make it very blown up, and he achieved this, he won this award, this is how he's so successful and amazing. But this course is very it's aimed at creators, and so there is none of that trying to market himself or market his films or whatever. It's just him, and it's so well made. I really love it. I guess I could geek out about that, but nobody cares. And same with the Duffer Brothers. They're just, oh man, they like create this whole story in front of you, and they're just sitting there like talking over each other and writing this thing and talking about how they come up with ideas, and it's just, they're not trying to sell anything, they're just writing it. But anyway,
Can you remind me what the Duffer Brothers have done? Some of their stuff.
Stranger Things. Just Stranger Things.
Good enough. Yeah.
They created Stranger Things. I feel like
Fair enough.
everyone on the planet knows that, but
okay, that's kind of rude. It's okay to ask questions
they also,
when you don't know stuff.
You're right. They also worked on that show that I can't remember the name of. Never mind. I can't remember.
You don't know stuff too.
Yeah. Yep, I'm an idiot as well. Anyway,
Cool.
I've been watching that and just getting really excited about, I mean, clearly, uh, just all these ideas and coming up with
Yeah.
stuff. And I do not have a shred of that pressure that I have had as an artist of, oh, I need to be like this. I need to be this good, or I need whatever. I don't have any of that. And I'm just kind of coming up with these ideas and writing stuff, and it sucks, but also I really love the ideas, so it doesn't really matter that it sucks. I don't know. It's just been really,
Yeah.
really cool, and I'm really enjoying that. So, yeah.
So, a couple things. First, you should read the David Foster Wallace essay on David Lynch, which
Okay.
might be
Is
getting
it
a
nice?
little. Is it? Yeah, no, it's great. It's David Foster Wallace, who is probably my favorite writer of all time. I know that. Well, no, he's probably my favorite writer of all time, and he's writing about David Lynch, just explaining why David Lynch is so amazing, and he just talks about what David Lynch does, and you should read it because it's
Okay, I
just
love
really
it,
cool.
and I will read it. Yes.
Yeah.
I love David Lynch also.
Okay.
So, if that wasn't clear already.
Right. Although I don't think Dune was very good. I've also heard that maybe it
Well,
wasn't
I
entirely
don't
his
think that
fault.
was it wasn't his fault. But anyway,
All right, whatever. So the I said this a few weeks ago, this quote, and I butchered it, but I figured out what it actually is, and it's really been in my head of from Rick and Morty. Like, good music comes from people who are relaxed. It's just this thing that's said totally offhand,
Yeah,
but
yeah, okay.
it's so in my brain now. I have it written at the top of my to-do list, so every time I update my to-do list, I see it. But that's just been the idea that has been sitting with me for quite a while now. And hopefully, you said you're reading The Inner Game of Tennis, and I'm actually rereading it because I liked it. I'm reading a self-help book twice, which is insane.
Yeah.
Never would have thought that. But anyway, so we'll hopefully talk about that more next week. But that's just part of this idea and feeling that's been really sitting with me, is this concept that you do your best stuff when you're in that mindset of you're relaxed and you're having fun. Recently, Sam and I watched, I think it was Batman Forever, or one of the older Batman movies. And the movie sucks. But it has Jim Carrey as the Riddler. And I mean, obviously everyone knows Jim Carrey and they know what he's like and everything. But I just, watching Jim Carrey do what he does, something about it just feels so admirable and so impressive that this guy, he's clearly not emulating anyone. If I were to be an actor, which I don't think I could, but well, maybe, you know, if anyone were to try to be an actor, you tend to look at actors and you know, you would practice and try to get really good at doing what they do, and you know, executing a role in the way you think it's executed best. But you watch Jim Carrey, and it's like he just found this thing in himself of, I'm gonna be insane and so over the top, just with his face, with everything. He just contorts himself. But and if anyone else tried that, you would look at that and go, that's stupid. That's just overacting. That's dumb. But he commits so hard and that it just works. It's so, I can hardly explain it, but if you just watch Jim Carrey in one of those roles where he's just 1,000 times over the top, like, man, that guy he just does it. He's so relaxed. He's not, you can tell that he's not sitting there thinking, oh, I hope people like this. I don't, you know, is this too much? Is this going to be funny? That does not appear to be crossing his mind at all. And he just creates, I mean, he's Jim Carrey. He's like one of the most unique, you know, physical comedic people we've ever seen. And something about that I'm just so in awe of, and it in some ways feels really foreign to me, where I tend to be very critical and analytical. We are the overanalyzers after all. There's a lot of analysis, and I mean, there's of course a that can be really key, but at the same time, there's also this mental state of just happiness and abandon and joy, and it's free of criticism and free of self-analysis and everything. And I've been thinking about that a lot, and I want to try to be able to get there more often. I think it's especially hard as adults. You know,
Hmm.
we've both taught adults and children, and you can see, how much more frequently a child is able to get into that mental state. Sometimes they just live there, where they're just doing what they do. But an adult is so self-critical and aware of their image and the way they're coming off, that they can wind up just never being able to get there.
Yeah, and I think this sort of transitions into the inner game of tennis. But
Mm-hmm.
before we go too deep into it, David Lynch and the Duffer Brothers both are just so perfectly mirroring all of this way of thinking. And I don't know, it's so cool to see because David Lynch and the Duffer Brothers are completely different
Mm-hmm.
people, make totally different films. They're just so separate from different eras. They're just very different. And yet they're both talking about how important it is to be themselves. Like the Duffer Brothers, they said that the first script that finally got picked up was the first one where they stopped thinking about it and just kind of wrote what they wanted to write. Which is, you hear it all the time, but and these are the people that are writing the one of, if not the most successful TV show right now. Uh, at least the probably the biggest. Um, and they're talking about how all of their scripts just kind of sucked because they wanted so badly to be good at writing scripts, and they
Mm-hmm.
wanted, you know, to be picked up, and they wanted to work on a TV show or a movie or whatever. So they kept writing these things, and they kept trying to, pay attention to what was relevant at the time and what was being picked up. And then they're just like, okay, forget it. Let's just write something that we really like. Sure enough, that's the one that finally gets picked up. And that was their first movie or something. And David Lynch is talking about the same thing, and that, if you can write about, okay, you were saying music is written by people who are relaxed, right? Is that the
That's how I
quote? Did I
butchered
just
the
butcher
quote.
it?
The actual quote is,
Okay.
"Good music comes from people who are relaxed." I really
That's
hope that's
basically
right.
exactly what. Well, we'll go with that. That's what David Lynch said, pretty much to the T. Is that you can't, like, you can write about pain and you can write about suffering and drama and very intense scenes, but you can't do it in that mind state. He was saying, like, you have to be relaxed and you have to get rid of the stress and you have to let go of
Yeah.
that frustration and all of that stuff if you want to really write well. And that was just, it seems so simple, but I don't know.
Well, it
I'm just
it's
finding that and
yeah.
trying to, in all the stuff that I'm doing right now, I'm trying to weed out all this frustration and yeah, I don't know.
Well, simple to say doesn't mean simple to do. And I have never taken singing lessons, but what I've heard from all of my singing friends who, went to school and did their degrees in, vocal performance and everything, was that most of what you do as you're trying to learn to sing is to not tense up. And they talk about how a baby can scream and it will shatter the windows, even though it's this tiny little baby with a tiny set of lungs. But they do it in this very free, relaxed, open sort of way, and they're able to just reverberate those tiny set of lungs to the point where it'll make your ears bleed. But for an adult who's a thinking, conscious person, it becomes very difficult. You are really trying to do something without just relaxing and letting it happen. Um, I well, just one more exclamation point on that. I just finished reading The Golem and the Jinni, which is a novel a debut novel by, I think her name is Helene Wecker, be sure. And it's a great novel. It's so good. It's actually the second time I've read it, which that actually makes two books that I'm just finished rereading, which is crazy because I don't usually do that. But um, Helene Wecker, she has her little sort of self biography, explains the book in the back, and she's talking about how she went to school for writing, but she wound up just in jobs doing, writing promotional material and pamphlets and copy for different companies and advertising and things like that. And she wanted to get into fiction writing, and so she started working on it, and she wrote all these stories, and they all sucked. And she was doing all these workshops where you get feedback and everything. And she said that the turning point for her was when she had put out this story, and it was the same thing. It just wasn't really that great. And she was talking to her review partner or whatever. And this person said, "Why are you writing like this?" And Helene's like, "What do you mean like this?" Like, all you talk about, all you read is fantasy and sci-fi and that kind of thing. And yet you write in this totally realistic way of, you talk about a guy who's growing up in this town and whatever. Like, there's none of that fantasy and everything. And Helene Wecker really reflected on that. I was like, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I like. But to her, it just felt like that wasn't, I don't know, legitimate enough, or, it wasn't what people would want or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So she writes this book, The Golem and the Genie, which is, I mean, her first novel, and it's fantastic. And she just released the sequel. And it's this funny, almost hybrid of a fantasy where it's, the golem is this clay animated, almost Frankenstein's monster type creature, and then the genie is a genie, and it's the story of these two sort of creatures. So they're very person-like, meeting in New York, and this whole story about them. Anyway, it was that same moment of just reading about her and her mindset of that tipping point of, I'm just gonna do the thing that I love, and I'm not gonna worry about whether it fits a genre perfectly or whether this is what people are gonna want or be marketed. And she wound up writing one of my favorite books of all time because it's just so pure, and it's exactly that. It's, a relaxed person writing in a way that, my little bit of analysis on that is that when you're creating a piece of art, or really in almost anything, has some aspect of art to it, right? Even me, I'm writing software, but then at the end of the day, I'm also making judgments about what does a person want to see, what feels right and natural and makes
Right.
sense and everything, right? So there's all those elements to it. But those are judgments. They're little decisions. Some are big, some are small, but they're judgments that have to be made. And there just isn't there's no formula for that. We don't have some way of modeling what feels good to a person. Or if you're painting a picture, I mean, of course there's things like perspective and, realistic lighting and stuff, but at the end of the day, you're having to make these, thousands of little judgment calls of, yeah, this should be here, this feels right, or I want this person to have this expression. And you're having to make these judgments of what feels good to a person. And if you can't feel it yourself, if you aren't just relaxed and experiencing it and able to detect those little moments of, nah, this feels good, or this just doesn't quite work, then you can't make those judgments. And so you wind up doing something mechanical and formulaic. And so someone else sees it, and then they have that feeling of, I don't know, it just doesn't quite do it for me. Like, you have to be in touch with that ability to feel that, because you can't make those kinds of decisions otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, I have like three examples, but okay, to go with your author example, there's this artist named Heinrich Klee or Clay. Uh, and he used to do these landscapes, and critics hated him. Well, they just thought he sucked. Really, he just was nothing to write home about. He just
Right.
wasn't very good. He would, do these big landscape paintings. Not good, not not good at all. And I guess I don't totally know the full story, but eventually he just got sick of doing that, and he started doing these very like crude, very messy ink drawings, and they were really really good. And I mean they were just the total opposite of what he was doing before, which was this careful landscape,
Hmm.
architectural stuff. He just goes full on into this very messy, I don't know, sometimes gross, sometimes I don't know, just amazing, like full of action uh, ink drawings. Well, I guess that gets really popular. Walt Disney ends up, from what I understand, he ends up buying like this enormous collection of Heinrich Kleid drawings, and he bases like all of the early Disney
Yeah.
drawings off of Heinrich Kleid because he just loves it so much, and he did so much for anthropomorphizing animals and stuff. So he became like this enormous influence to Walt Disney and all of Disney characters from then on. It's just incredible. But okay, so here's an example. I watched this show called One Fantastic Week, and on the show they used to do these mentorships where they bring in there were two artists, and they would bring on a like an amateur artist and kind of go through their work and try to get that. It wasn't about like building technical skills. It was about sort of bringing out the person, like finding what they really like and what they're good at, and how to this exact thing, like how to bring that out of a person.
Yeah.
And so they're looking at the work, and it's just not like, it's kind of all over the place. He's doing the freelance stuff, and it's fantasy, but it's just, you can tell his heart's not in it. It's just, it doesn't really
The
make
person that
sense.
they're mentoring, you mean? Like
Yeah,
they're
yeah, the
analyzing
mentee.
this. Yeah.
Yes. Um, his artwork is just kind of scatterbrained, and like there's this one piece that's supposed to be this epic fantasy piece. It's this guy fighting a monster, and it's just like, I don't know, everything falls flat. The monster's like, he clearly doesn't care about it, and he
Yeah.
knows it, and he's just, he's frustrated with it, and whatever. There's this other piece where there's like this girl in this forest, and the girl's kind of posed awkwardly, and it just doesn't really work. But in the background, there's these epic, amazing, like beautiful painted trees, and the whole forest is just incredible. But it only takes up maybe 20% of the picture.
Hmm.
And so one of the hosts, Pete Moorbacher, he's like, okay, take the girl and shrink her down, like way down, and look at the picture. And it's just this epic, like incredible landscape, like just with these plants and these trees that are just flowing, and it's just amazing. And the guys, the mentees, just, yeah, but it's like a landscape. Like that's not real art. Like that's not real, right? Like he just has these preconceived ideas. It was just such a cool thing to watch. But they go through this mentorship, and they're slowly, trying to downplay the things that he's not good at, or not even not good at, just things that he clearly doesn't enjoy. Because
Hmm.
in something like art, it's very, very noticeable when an artist does not want to do something. So if you have a scene, and let's say it's a figure in a forest, and you love the forest, but you don't want to be painting the figure is going to look bad. The forest is going to look amazing because that's where you spend all your time. That's where
Yeah.
you trust your instincts. That's where you're feeling it, and you know what you want to see. Whereas the other one, you're doing exactly what you said. You're guessing at what you think it's supposed to be, and it's just this constant frustration. So they go through this mentorship, and they're slowly weeding things out till they get to the point where they're basically saying, look, you just want to be a landscape artist. Like that's it. You like, stop painting on the computer, which he was doing a lot of digital art. Like stop doing digital art, stop taking freelance, and just go paint some plants. And he kind of fought that at first, But after a couple weeks, he really started getting behind it and really started loving it. And he realized like, oh my God, this is my thing. This is what I really love. And his social media goes from like this, dragging, 50 followers, 100 followers to just like thousands and thousands. He's at, I don't know, like probably over 200,000 followers now. He's just like
Jeez.
exploded. And the quality of the art just completely changed. It was, I mean, in the span of a year, he just went from, I don't know, this sort of
Yeah.
frustrated amateur artist to this landscape traditional painter that is really big now. His name's Justin Donaldson, if you want to look him up. But it was just
Cool.
so cool to watch that, and just very relatable, because you realize that when you do all of this stuff, the things, if it's really, if it's anything, if with art, if you don't like it, it's going to suck. So you can either get better at it, learn to love it, or you downplay it and you get rid of it. And so I've started to try and treat things that way. And I think in the past I've always tried to, if I'm really frustrated with it or I don't like it, I just try to, I don't know, force my way through it.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
I,
What do you think about? Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. It's the more I think about it, frustration is almost like the opposite end of that. Um, if you think about being frustrated, I don't think I have ever done a good thing in my life out of frustration. I've never
Mm-hmm.
seen somebody do something great while they're frustrated and angry. If you're doing anything, if you get frustrated with it, your performance degrades. I mean, that's
Well, okay, if you're, I think the probably the common rebuttal to that would be, well, what about sports? What if,
yeah.
because I remember playing basketball and, you get, I don't know, pushed over or whatever, you miss a shot and you're just like doubly determined to go
Yeah,
get
that
it.
so
But
that's a sorry, that's a good objection. Um there is a difference between being angry and determined and frustrated. So I think oftentimes anger will up your adrenaline and it can even up your focus. So it can be really good.
I
Frustration,
think that's the important part, is it ups your focus, really.
right, right. And adrenaline. I mean, just especially for a sport, right? If you're more amped up, you can be in a higher performance mode. But when you're genuinely frustrated, and for me, usually frustration happens when I feel like I'm not performing well. I get angry with myself in a way. That's maybe how I would define frustration. Regardless, it feels like the opposite of relax to me, and I don't feel like I ever do well with that. And so just more and more I've started to think about that mindset of that just enjoyment and relaxation and everything as being this almost holy grail of where I want to be. Uh, but at the same time, the more you think about that and try to force yourself there,
Right.
you're pretty much by definition not doing that because you're just thinking about how, oh, I'm going to do so well because I'm going to be so relaxed and focused, and it's tricky. Uh,
Yeah.
but okay, so one more quick thing. Haven't finished it yet, but I started watching an interview between Andrew Huberman and Ido Portal, and I know that some of our listeners are big Andrew Huberman fans, but I again haven't finished it in about an hour in. It's long, but I highly recommend it because Ido Portal is this guy that I've kind of kept up with and enjoyed for a long time. He's such a interesting and unique guy in that he you listen to him talk for an hour and I can't decide if he's a genius or if he's just full of crap and saying nothing. It's like one of those sorts of things where it's this really flowery language, and he's really got this very idealistic view of things, and I just can't quite decide how I feel about it. But he's this guy, and he talks about movement, and he talks about movement with a capital M, and he has this almost reverence for it, and how he claims that, you know, humans are built to move, and that our way of experiencing the world is through movement, and how we shouldn't think of ourselves as a brain with a body attached to it. We could think of ourselves as a body with a brain attached to it, and that our, you know, our thoughts are just an expression of movement, and everything we do is movement. Anyway, he's just all about this movement stuff. And he he has a lot of these kind of funny philosophies where he said that, okay, you were talking about the writing stuff, how you're trying to learn this. I don't know if calligraphy is the right word, but, you know, writing letters and everything, and how you're trying to
Sure.
learn how to write this font, but there's missing letters, so you're having to kind of make them up. He talks about
Mm-hmm.
how Ido Portal talks about how there's he always wants something to be missing. uh you know, if he's counting reps for somebody, or like, you know, they're doing some set of something, he'll count to 9 and then stop, because psychologically you tend to want to stop at 10 or 12 or 15. Like, there's these certain numbers that you gravitate towards because of their, just because we use base 10 counting, and that's what feels right. Like 11's a weird number, but 12 is good, and 13's a stupid number, but 15 is good, and things like that. And how if you just you leave something out and let somebody just do things without those kinds of preconceived notions, you can get better results, or, you know, you're more exploratory. He has this little story about how he is just trying to he he was in, I think, Hong Kong, he said, and he wanted to use his body, but he doesn't like commercial gyms because he thinks they're very restrictive. So he said he just walked out in the crowd in Hong Kong with a backpack on, and for just for hours he would just move through the crowd and try to never touch anybody. And he would just, I mean, it's super crowded and people are jostling around, and so he's just practicing this motion of his body, trying to anticipate other people and to move around them and everything. And it's, so if you actually go look up videos of this guy Ido Portal and watch him do things, it's actually insane, the kind of stuff he can do. Just incredible strength, incredible body control. He can just, you know, stand on his hands and crawl through a thing, and just, like it, it's actually extremely impressive what this guy's able to do. Anyway, it's been on my mind a little bit, and I think it kind of fits with what we've been talking about today, which is there's just there's something so amazing about just exploring and feeling and experiencing, and in, you know, in Neil Portal's view, the movement and motion of things. um and I'm just I want to explore that a little bit, and just do
Okay.
some of that.
Well, it's weird that you bring that up because you know how I said that me and art have kind of had this frustrated
Yeah.
relationship the last few years. Well, I start becoming friends with this other artist, Nacho, and he starts looking at my work, and he is way better than me, especially at the things that I'm really bad at. Uh,
Okay.
so, you know, I'm looking to him for answers and kind of direction on, you know, how do I improve at this stuff? And I show him a bunch of my work, and it's complicated, but basically what he said was your drawings are lacking movement. And he goes into this long, very long talk about how everything moves, and like the science of movement and how that needs to show up in your work. And at first I'm like, okay, whatever, like let, let's get to
Yeah.
something that's real. Or but he goes very in depth on all of it, and it you start thinking about it, and the way we perceive the whole world. Everything's constantly moving. And if you talk about it too much, you start to sound a little crazy, but
Yeah.
it's such an important aspect to all drawing. I it's something I totally completely have written off since the beginning, but now that I've been thinking about it over this past 6 months or year or so, it's totally changed the way I think about drawing and seeing things and perception. So it's weird that you bring that up, and I'm gonna go listen to that. If you can
I
send me a
want you
link at
to.
some
It'd
point.
be great to maybe in the next week or two we talk a little bit about the inner game of tennis, which you were reading, and then maybe a little bit of that too, because actually it's so strange because the inner game of tennis is a book by a tennis coach that was written 40 or 50 years ago or something. It's this old
Right.
sports psychology book.
Which we're not trying to
Neither
be
one of
tennis
us are
players,
doing
so
sports, right?
right.
And then there's this interview with Ido Portal, who's this sort of guru-esque figure, uh, and it feels just so different. But I don't know. It feels like both of these things are kind of orbiting around this core idea of being able to let go or learning how to get into these mental states of just discovery and enjoyment and everything. And so let's talk a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more about that because I that's where I'm at on what I'm interested in right now.
Okay, me too.
Cool. Cool. It's cool that we're both kind of been thinking that way a little bit independently. We haven't talked about any of this stuff really.
It is weird. I guess there's just this sort of natural path or series of
Mm-hmm.
questions you run into. Or maybe we're both priming the other person to
Right,
I
sure.
don't know.
Sure. That could be. I like to think there's something there that we're both asking the same questions. We're both trying to do something. Uh, we both set out on the main quest and we're at roughly similar points, and so we're trying to solve similar problems. And again, it could be confirmation bias or whatever, but
Right.
I like to think that there's, we're
Yeah.
coming upon truths. Something. All right, you have anything else to add? Because that's kind of me for today.
No, that's good.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks. Thanks for hanging out with us today, everybody. Remember, we really, really love to hear from you. I know we don't always respond, but we do always, always read and listen to what you guys are saying. So you can leave us comments on YouTube. You can email us at the overanalyzerspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to support the show and you're into what we're doing, you can support us on YouTube, and there should be a link in the show notes on podcasting platforms. I'm mostly sure that's there, but if not, maybe let us know. Uh, but yeah, thanks so much for all the support, not just monetary, but just emotional support, and for listening and being a part of what we're into. So thank you. We'll see you next week.